Before we start with questions, I just want to address, what's going on with AT. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely unacceptable.
You just heard that. A head coach of a professional basketball franchise, standing at a podium, using her press conference time not to check on her own injured star, but to lecture the new fans who showed up and tripled her league's viewership about whether or not they are welcome. This is the story of a league that found its golden goose and decided the most urgent priority was to bite it. Hard. In front of everyone. On camera. My name is not important. What is important is Caitlin Clark, the single most valuable asset in the WNBA's 28-year history, and the head coach of her own franchise, Stephanie White, who just walked up to a microphone and essentially told 2/3 of the people now watching this sport to get out. And by the time we hit the 10-minute mark of this video, you are going to understand exactly who benefits from Caitlin Clark being made to feel like a problem in her own house. Stick with me, because this is one of the most staggering cases of institutional self-destruction I have ever had the displeasure of documenting.
Our league is about inclusiveness. Our league is about competition. Our league is about elevating women.
Let's set the table, because context is everything here. Before Caitlin Clark arrived in the WNBA, the league was drawing roughly 400,000 viewers per game. 400,000. I want you to hold that number in your head because we are coming back to it. That is the baseline. That is what 28 years of brand building, social messaging, activism, and quote-unquote inclusivity had produced. 400,000 people. On a good night, then Caitlin Clark, the asset, the money, the one draw this league has ever had at this scale, steps onto an Indiana Fever court, and the entire equation changes overnight. Viewership does not inch up, it does not modestly improve, it triples. The same league that could not crack 1 million viewers on its best day is suddenly a cultural conversation. Sold-out arenas, national television, mainstream sports media that had never once covered a WNBA regular season game is now sending reporters to Indiana. And what does the Indiana Fever's head coach Stephanie White do with that extraordinary gift? She calls a press conference, and instead of talking about her franchise player, instead of asking whether Caitlin Clark is okay after getting hurt, Stephanie White uses that microphone to defend Alyssa Thomas, a player from a completely different team, and to signal to the new audience that they are not the right kind of fans. Let me be completely clear about what happened here. Stephanie White did not accidentally stumble into controversy. She walked directly into it, arms open, with purpose. This was a choice.
It's why 400,000 fans tuned into a game before Caitlin Clark shows up, before she showed up. 400,000 fans watch games. Nobody.
Now I want you to think about what this looks like from a pure business standpoint, because the sports entertainment business is not complicated. You find the thing that makes the register ring. You protect it, you build around it. You do not walk up to a podium and tell the customers who just tripled your revenue that you have reservations about their demographics. It is like a restaurant owner who has been limping along for years, barely keeping the lights on, and then one chef joins the kitchen, and suddenly there is a line around the block every single night. And instead of protecting that chef, instead of putting their name on the marquee and making sure every customer who walked through that door felt welcome, the owner gets on the intercom and announces that some of the people in line are not the right kind of diners. And by the right kind, she means the ones who showed up before the line existed. That is what Stephanie White did. That is not hyperbole. That is not me hyping this up for clicks. That is simply the math of what occurred at that press conference. And here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. And by genuinely fascinating, I mean absolutely catastrophic for the business. Because Stephanie White is not a rogue actor here. She is a symptom. The WNBA as an institution has spent years building an identity around social causes and activism, and that is their right. But when your viewership was 400,000 people, that identity was the entire product. The moment Caitlin Clark arrived and tripled that number, the league suddenly had a massive new audience that showed up for basketball. Just basketball. And the league's response, led by coaches like Stephanie White, has been to treat that audience as an intrusion. If you are finding this breakdown valuable, please hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We cover this league with the scrutiny it deserves, and there is a lot more coming.
WNBA has a lot of problems, double standards being among them. Did the coach say anything publicly about Sophie getting online, real-life threats, and even being physically stalked for months, threats, egregious slurs by WNBA? Did she or didn't she?
Our league is about inclusiveness. That is the direct quote. Inclusiveness. From a coach who spent her press conference telling new fans they are not welcome unless they check the right boxes. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Inclusiveness, defined apparently as everyone is welcome as long as you already agreed with us before you got here. This is the specific failure of this moment, and it is worth naming precisely. Stephanie White had a choice at that press conference. She could have done what coaches in every other professional sport do after a controversy involving online harassment. She could have condemned the harassment specifically, defended all of her players, including Caitlin Clark, and moved on. Full stop, clean, professional, unifying. Instead, Stephanie White chose to use that moment to draw a political and cultural line. She invoked the league's social causes. She invoked inclusivity of marginalized communities. She pointed at the new audience, the audience that tripled her league's viewership, and she implied, loudly enough for everyone to hear, that those fans are the source of the problem. And by implying that, she did something that no amount of social media controversy could have done on its own. She made it a coach versus fans story. She made it a league versus its own growth story. She handed every critic of the WNBA the single most damaging soundbite they could have asked for, gift-wrapped, at a press conference that she called herself. Now let's talk about the pattern, because this is not an isolated incident. The transcript of what happened here is remarkably consistent with how this league has handled the Caitlin Clark era from the very beginning. Every single time a controversy arises that involves Caitlin Clark in any way, the institutional response from the WNBA and from figures like Stephanie White has been to redirect attention away from Clark and toward a different narrative. When Clark was on the receiving end of a flagrant foul, the conversation was immediately redirected. When her fans showed up in record numbers, the conversation became about whether those fans were the right kind of fans. When she was hurt, the press conference became about Alyssa Thomas's feelings. I want every single person watching this to understand what that pattern represents. It is not accidental. It is not a series of unfortunate missteps. It is a consistent institutional posture that treats Caitlin Clark, the asset, the economic engine, the one reason this league is on national television right now, as a complication to be managed rather than a phenomenon to be celebrated. And the enablers are not hard to find. Where was the league office when Stephanie White delivered this press conference? Where was the public statement defending the new fan base? Where was the institutional voice saying, actually, we are grateful for every single person who tuned in, regardless of where they came from or what they look like? Silence. And silence in this context is not neutrality. Silence is endorsement.
Before we start with questions, I just want to address, what's going on with AT. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely unacceptable.
400,000 fans. That is what this league had before Caitlin Clark. 400,000 viewers watching a game. That number is not an insult. It is simply the reality of where the WNBA stood as a business before the most marketable player in the sport's history walked through the door. And now the league has tripled that. Tripled. And 2/3 of those new viewers, 2/3 of the people who pushed this league from a niche product into a mainstream conversation, showed up because of one person, one asset, one draw. And what is the league doing with that? What is Stephanie White doing with that? She is standing at a podium telling those 2/3 that the league has reservations about them. This is the worst of both worlds, and I need you to understand why. If you alienate the new audience, you do not go back to the old numbers. You do not go back to 400,000. You go lower, because the old audience was already there. They were already watching. You have not retained them by doing this. You have simply added the new audience's resentment to the equation. You have built a house of cards and then kicked out the only support beam holding it up. And here is what is genuinely maddening about all of this. And by genuinely maddening, I mean the kind of thing that makes you want to flip a table. Caitlin Clark herself has not done anything to deserve this institutional treatment. She shows up, she plays, she does not go to the microphone and lecture anyone about politics. She does not draw lines in the sand about who belongs and who does not. She plays basketball at a level this league has not seen in a generation, and she does it with the kind of competitive fire that fills arenas. That is the asset, that is the money, that is the commodity that Stephanie White is supposed to be protecting, developing, and celebrating. Instead, Stephanie White is defending a player from a rival team, while her own franchise player's well-being goes unaddressed at the press conference. Let me say that again because it is almost too absurd to process. Caitlin Clark gets hurt, the press conference happens, and Stephanie White's opening statement is not about Caitlin Clark. It is about Alyssa Thomas, a Connecticut Sun player, her former player, not her current responsibility, not the asset in her own locker room. It is like watching someone tend to a stranger's garden while their own house is on fire. And by tending the garden, I mean standing in front of cameras doing it on purpose while everyone watches. Now I want to bring in a voice here because I think it is important to hear how this reads to people who are watching this from the outside.
Our league is about inclusiveness. Our league is about competition. Our league is about elevating women.
The double standard. That is the word that keeps coming up, and it is the right word. Because here is what we know from the transcript of what has been discussed publicly. Sophie Cunningham, another player on the Indiana Fever roster, has reportedly been on the receiving end of racial harassment online. Real threats, egregious language directed at her specifically. And the question that nobody in the mainstream press is asking is a simple one. Did Stephanie White call a press conference about Sophie Cunningham? Did the league issue a statement? Did anyone in the institutional apparatus of the WNBA step to a microphone and say that the harassment directed at Sophie Cunningham is absolutely unacceptable? Because if the answer to that question is no, and everything we have seen suggests the answer is no, then what Stephanie White did at that press conference is not a defense of all players. It is a selective defense. And selective defense is not a moral position, it is a political one. I want to be precise here because precision matters. Condemning online harassment is correct. It is right. No player in any league should have to deal with racist or homophobic abuse online. And anyone doing that is wrong, full stop. But the moment you apply that standard selectively, the moment you call a press conference for one player's experience and stay silent about another's, you have revealed that the principle is not actually the point. The point is the narrative. And the narrative, in this case, appears to be about who gets protected and who does not. While Caitlin Clark was busy being the economic engine that gave this league its biggest television numbers in recent memory, the league was busy deciding that the fans who showed up to watch her were the problem. That is the no-win framing that Caitlin Clark is trapped inside. When her fans are vocal, they are toxic. When she succeeds, the story becomes about someone else. When she gets hurt, the press conference is about a player on a different team. There is no version of this where Caitlin Clark is simply allowed to be the star and be treated accordingly. And that is not sustainable, not financially, not institutionally, not for the long-term health of a league that was drawing 400,000 viewers before she arrived and is now a national conversation.
It's why 400,000 fans tuned in to a game before Caitlin Clark shows up, before she showed up. 400,000 fans watch games. Nobody.
So here is the verdict, and I am going to be direct about it. Stephanie White made a catastrophic error at that press conference. Not a political error, not a cultural error, a business error. She looked at a room full of cameras that were there because of Caitlin Clark, and she used that platform to tell the new audience, the 2/3 of viewers who tripled this league's numbers, that their presence in this sport comes with conditions attached. That is not coaching. That is not leadership. That is an institution so accustomed to preaching to a captive audience of 400,000 loyal viewers that it does not know how to behave when 3 times as many strangers walk through the door. And here is my prediction. The ratings fallout from moments like this one is not going to be immediate. It is going to be gradual. Because the new audience, the sports fans who came for Caitlin Clark, who watched the NFL and college football and Major League Baseball, and who had never once tuned into a WNBA game before this season, those fans have options. They have always had options. They chose to show up here. And the moment the cost of showing up feels higher than the reward of watching Caitlin Clark play basketball, they are going to exercise those options and leave. And when that happens, the league will not go back to 400,000. It will go lower. Because you cannot unring this bell. You cannot tell 2/3 of your new audience that they are not welcome and then expect them to stay. 400,000 viewers. That is the floor this league built over 28 years. Caitlin Clark tripled it in a single season. And Stephanie White just spent a press conference trying to hand it back. That is not hyperbole. That is not me being dramatic for the algorithm. That is simply what the math looks like when you run it forward. The asset is Caitlin Clark. The money is Caitlin Clark. The one draw in this league at this scale is Caitlin Clark. And the Indiana Fever's head coach just stood at a podium and told the people who showed up to watch Caitlin Clark that the league has concerns about them. I want you to sit with that. And then I want you to go to the comments section.
WNBA has a lot of problems, double standards being among them. Did the coach say anything publicly about Sophie getting online, real-life threats, and even being physically stalked for months? Threats, egregious slurs by WNBA. Did she or didn't she?
Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments right now. Forced choice, yes or no? Is the WNBA deliberately making Caitlin Clark's environment hostile to protect the league's old identity? Yes or no? Drop it below. I read every single comment on this channel, and I want to know exactly where you stand on this. If you are new here and this breakdown gave you something to think about, subscribe to Rant right now and turn on all notifications. We are covering this story as it develops, and you do not want to miss the next video. And when you are done in the comments, click the video on your screen right now, because what happens next in this story is going to make today look like a warm-up. This is Rant. We'll see you in the next one.